You are listening to WCJV Digital Broadcasting, Youngstown, New York, the CJ Mars Radio Network.
Your radio has been taken over by forces of the unknown. You have been warned, so listen at your own risk. Be prepared as we discuss the paranormal. We will talk about things unseen, unknown, and unexplained. Here on Half Past Dead Paranormal Radios, with your host, Roger Belt. Keep listening if you dare.
We are live on WCJV Digital Broadcasting out of Youngstown, New York, the CJ Mars Radio Network. You are listening to Half Past Dead Paranormal Radio with your host, Roger Belt, and my special guest tonight, and I hope I say this right, Christina Corsetti.
Yep, that's correct.
Awesome. Also known as Haunted Salem. And we're going to be talking about the Salem witch trials and haunted locations in Salem.
Yeah, it's going to be a great night, actually.
I think I have an echo again. I don't know where that came from. Anyways, glad to see everybody here tonight. Cheryl and my thing here. Okay. Mary Strickland, and of course my pal is Harold Carter. Bo is here. Bo says Alice Cooper ? Okay. Anyway, we're going to jump right into this thing because we have all kinds of fun stuff that we're going to talk about. We have talked about this stuff and the belief in the supernatural, and specifically in the devil's practice of giving certain humans, quote unquote, witches, the power to harm others in return for their loyalty emerged in Europe as early as the 14th century and was widespread in colonial New England. We knew that. I think it's important, though, to understand where it all started as well as what happened in Salem, so that's why I'm bringing this up. And one of the things that interested me in my first question to you,
Sure.
The crossing from the other country over to what is now America, who was first, the Pilgrims or the Puritans?
Well, first, the Pilgrims came in about the 1620s, and they were followed in by thousands of Puritans in about the 1630s. So the people we know as Pilgrims, there was about like 100 of them. And they made their voyage aboard the ship of the Mayflower in September of 1620, and they founded Plymouth Colony. Well, they landed on the shores of Cape Cod, which is the present-day Massachusetts, and a scouting party was sent out in the late December, and they landed on Plymouth Harbor, where they would form the first permanent settlement of Europeans in New England. So these original settlers of Plymouth Colony are known as the Pilgrim Fathers, or simply known as the Pilgrims. But the Puritans now were members of a religious movement that began in the England in about 1500, and it lasted till about 1600s when it spread out to the American colonies. So back in England, the Puritans had people of means and political influence, but King Charles, he wouldn't tolerate any of their attempts to reform the Church of England. So basically they had no hope, and they had hope in America. So they left England, and they came to America and established a colony whose government and society and church were all based on the Bible. So the Puritans actually believed in God and his worship that were important enough to reserve at least one full day of the week, but the original Puritans settled joyfully devoted Sundays to the Lord, and that's why we actually have church on Sunday.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, well, now, and this is where it's a little bit contradictory and confusing because of what you just said. The King of England was basically the one who pretty much made being a pagan or a witch or whatever. If you didn't follow the church, you were a witch or a devil.
Yeah.
Also, the king was the head of the church. So if you turn your back on the church, you were turning your back on your king, and that was considered treason, and people were uh, hung and whatever over that also.
Yes.
So my second question, with all this going on, pretty much would be found guilty if accused of witchcraft. Would you not be the first one in line to jump on a ship out of there?
But, yeah, I know I would be. There's a lot that goes into this, actually. And, witchcraft persecutions really began in England in about 1563 with the statue of Elizabeth the First, much later than anywhere else in Europe. So it did not really become fully developed until the reign of James I. Various estimates that have given the number of persons hanged as witches in England, pretty much between 1542 to 1736, there was over 1,000 witches hung in England.
That's just awesome. I mean, not awesome. That's not the word I'm looking for. It's overwhelming. It's just.
It's very overwhelming, and it was widespread, actually. See, English witchcraft trials took a different direction in those of Europe. In England, there were generally no elements of extreme torture. They weren't burned at the stake. And under English law, burning was a penalty for treason, and those witches who were burned in England suffered that fate because they were convicted in a crime of petty treason.
Exactly. That's what I was saying. They turned their back on the church, so they turned their back on the king.
Correct. Back then, beliefs in magic was almost universal in the past. All cultures believed that you could use supernatural means to help hunting or to make your crops grow better or to make humans and animals more fertile. So magic could have been used to heal the sick. For the great majority of the people who lived there in the 18th century, magic was an ordinary part of everyday life. To them, the world was a mysterious and frightening place, and they did not know what caused disease, and they didn't know what other phenomena meant, and sometimes assumed that there was like supernatural behind it. Most people in the 16th, 17th century believed that God had an enemy called the devil, who was very powerful. So they believed that witches made a pact or agreement with the devil and agreed to worship and serve him. So the witches then used magic to harm animals or harm humans. And many people believe that in the 15th colonists who were out to cause harm. So that's a little different. But they were merely accused because they kept cats, which were thought to be familiar to demons given to witches by the devil to act as advisors and messengers, were these cats. And according to the witch hunters, during the height of the witch trials, a witch mark, which is usually called the devil's mark or witch's teeth, was significant indication that an individual was a witch. Identifying witches' marks were molds, scars, birthmarks, skin tags, ripples, anything like extra blemishes or insensitive patches of skin. So a witch's teat was associated with the feeding of familiar, which is the devil himself. So, but to answer your question, could you escape? Sure you could. Did they? I'm sure many have escaped the whole witch hunt. I'd be the first one out of there myself,
Right.
But basically, it didn't matter if you were, if you were accused as being a witch, it didn't matter if you were innocent or not. You were going down as being a witch because they said so. You know what I mean? Not
exactly.
You didn't have a choice in that matter. So.
Now, I told you I was going to bring this up, and this seems like the perfect spot because it mentions what you were just saying. The Malleus Maleficarum was a sort of handbook written on ways of how to condemn and torture and get a conviction that a person was a witch so that you could, execute them. And it mentions in there about the witch mark.
Yep.
And that they used like pins or needles or something. They would poke a needle or a pin or something into these marks. And if blood brought up or pain, or they showed intense pain, they could not be accused of being a witch. Those were not witch marks. But if they didn't show any signs of pain and no blood came forth, they were guilty.
Yeah. I mean, that's just crazy. It's craziness.
Yeah, and the reason I brought that up is because I think that I read, and I can't be positive on this. I'd have to go back through all the stuff that I looked up, but I think they did use that book during the Salem trials at some point.
Yeah.
And like I said, to verify that, I'd have to go back and look it all up again, but I'm pretty sure that they did. Anyway, I wanted to bring that up because I thought that was really interesting, and you hit right on the head when you mentioned the marks
Yeah.
or witch's teeth, because that's what they said.
Yeah.
Now, the crossing in 1629, and this is where I was talking about it's a little contradictory and confusing. They were basically fleeing England to get away from King Charles's rule and how he felt about their religion. But yet, what I also found, it says that in 1629, King Charles I of England granted a religious group called the Puritans a charter to settle an English colony in Massachusetts Bay Area.
Yeah.
Okay, now if they were running from him, why would they go to him to get a charter to establish an English colony if they were trying to get out from under the English rule?
Well, that's actually a great question, because the Puritans a strict Protestant life, and the fear of the devil and his servants made their New England society an easy target for the witchcraft hysteria. So Pacific Puritans' belief, perspectives, experiences, it led to and culminated in a witchcraft hysteria in colony New England. They believed in the active existence of demonic forces, and did almost all Christians of this period. Puritan pastors undertook exorcisms for demonic possession in some high-profile cases and believed in some allegations of witchcraft. So, like you said, did they bring them in or did they start when they got here? Well, when witchcraft comes up, we have to consider that while the Puritans believe in Satan and his power, they rarely felt completely sure that a human being was sharing in that power. There are many judicial records of some parties accusing someone of being a witch. There's usually a pro forma inquiry and then a logical settlement of the problem. Calling someone a witch in Puritan New England may have been like calling someone an SOB today. You know what I mean? And a way to insult someone to blow off steam or express your anger. So back then, they were just calling everyone out as a witch, for some reason or another, because they didn't, they had problems with the family or they didn't like, certain things about that person. And
exactly. Or they wanted to take over their property.
Exactly. It doesn't matter what the reason. Once you were being a witch, it was like you were in trouble because now you can't back out of that and they're going to accuse you regardless. But, see the upshot in that while the Puritans did believe in witchcraft and evil spirits, they really associated any real person to those beliefs and even more rarely prosecuted people as witches. So yeah, I'd have to say both. They did bring them in and they did start when they got there. So
and that was the reason for my question, if they were that, they believed so much in all that, and I even read that not everyone who came here was a Puritan. So,
correct.
If somebody came here on the ship with them that was not a Puritan but lived in their community or around their community, wouldn't they automatically assume, hey, we brought some witches and warlocks over here with us. They live over there in that house just outside the community there.
Yeah, because they weren't Puritan, correct?
Exactly, yeah. Okay, the first witch trial, and I found this interesting.
Okay.
The first witch trial was not held in Salem. It was held in Charlestown in 1648. A midwife and healer named Margaret Jones was accused of witchcraft. Villagers believed that she had a malignant touch that could cause deafness and nausea.
Yeah.
Jones was supposed to be able to foresee the future and even had a witch's teeth. She was hanged in 1648. Now, my question there was how many cases that you know of before the Salem witch trials?
Well,
somebody was actually convicted and hung or, executed.
Yeah, absolutely. Over the duration, basically, you're talking about 3 centuries, and estimated between 40 to 60,000 people were executed.
Man, that's a lot of death.
There's a lot. Then this is all before the Salem witch trials. You know what I mean? And basically, Among the best, there were trials in Scottish. You had Scottish trials. They ran for 2 years, and they implicated 70 people. You had Swedish trials in Sweden. They were 71 people beheaded and burned, all in a single day, too.
That's in one day?
And 71 people in one day in Sweden, and that was the largest witch trial in Sweden history.
Good Lord.
Yeah. And then you have the American Salem witch trials, which we know of today, and that was 20 people, 19 hung and 1 crushed. But besides the Salem witch trials, you have Germany. Now, Germany, basically, the Trier witch trials, which was 1581 to 1593, that was the biggest of the witch trials in European history, and that one was about 368 people in a mass execution.
Wow.
And then you have the Fulda witch trials, which is Germany, and that was about 250 deaths.
That was during 1603 to 1606.
1603 to 1606, yep. And next we had the Wurzburg witch trial. 1626 to 1631 was another German witch trial, and that one was the 30 Years' War. 157 men and women and the children in the city have all been burned at the stake, mostly after being beheaded. 219 estimated have been executed in the city, and about 900 were killed.
Man.
Yeah, so, I mean, ours was like the smallest, you know what I mean?
Right, and out of them, you know, they were doing like mass executions, like so many per day, or?
Yep, it was all in one day.
So they basically executed 219 people in one day?
Correct.
Okay, and it says 900 were killed. If they did 219 in one day, were they doing like basically hundreds of them per day?
Most likely.
Until, you know, they reached, I guess, 900 or whatever the amount was.
Mm-hmm. But they were burned at the stake and beheaded. I mean, you know what I mean? That alone is just...
Well, and think about that. Ask yourself, why would they feel the need to behead them and then burn them at the stake? Would burning them at the stake be enough?
Well, because they were witches. So it'd be the same thing as, you know what I mean? They want to make sure that they're
okay, we've got some echo coming in here.
Dead, you know, because they... Okay.
I don't know. Why we have this echo all of a sudden. Okay, is it still there? Hello? I wonder what the heck that is. It's going to be a pain. Okay, Christina, are you still here? Is she gone? Dadgummit. Okay, folks, we've lost our guest. Hopefully she'll be right back with us. Just bear with us, and we'll try to get this thing worked out. Skype is being a pain tonight. Oh, our phone lines are, yes. Oh, I was going to say our phone lines are open if anybody wants to call in with a question or a comment. Hey, William, I see William's in here. If you guys can hear me in the chat room, Skype is being a pain. We've lost our guest, and we're waiting to see if hopefully she's going to be right back. There's my Dita phone number up. Dita's so cool. 716-745-4266. Call in if you have a question or a comment or anything that has to do with the witch trials. And by the way, this show is going to be a two-parter, you guys. I didn't mention this. The first hour we are talking about the witch trials and all this good stuff. And during the second hour, we're going to be talking about actual haunted locations in Salem, Massachusetts, and all that kind of good stuff. So everybody stick around. Don't go anywhere. It's going to be interesting if we get our guests back. If we get our guests back, it's going to be interesting. Or else I could just sit around and talk and twiddle my thumbs and hum and do all kind of real exciting stuff like that. That's what I figure is causing this because I haven't had any problems before and I've never changed my settings. So I figure that it probably came with her, but that's okay. We have someone else who has problems with Skype every time they do a show, so we are familiar with these things. Anybody want to call in and keep me company while we're waiting on our guests to return? Feel free. 716-745-4266. Or else I'm going to have to sit here and talk to myself. And I'm not a very interesting person to talk to, so I might get bored with myself. Let's see. We have a Bo in the chat room. Okay, William, keep trying. Skype is just being a pain.
I'm here.
Okay. Are we back?
We are back.
Awesome. Okay. I've actually forgotten where it was that we were.
Well, we actually were talking about the different witch trials besides Salem.
Right. Okay. And the first trial in Salem, 1692, and I have a little problem with this because it mentions that it happened in January, and then it mentions that it happened later on in the year, so I'm not exactly sure what date it was, but when 9-year-old Elizabeth Parris and 11-year-old Abigail Williams, the daughter and niece, respectively, of the Reverend Samuel Parris, began experiencing fits and other mysterious maladies, a doctor concluded that the children were suffering from the effects of witchcraft.
Yes.
And the young girls collaborated the doctor's diagnosis under compulsion from the doctor and their parents. The girls named those allegedly responsible for their suffering, and those people were, on March 1st, Sarah Good, Sarah Osborne, and Tituba, an Indian slave from the Barbados, became the first Salem residents to be charged with the capital crime of witchcraft. Later that day, Tituba confessed to the crime and subsequently aided the authorities in identifying more Salem witches. Now, I have to hold right there because Tituba, from what I understand, were showing these girls rituals and stuff from her country.
Correct.
And also, I think she was giving them some kind of concoctions that she made that was supposed to help them because they were feeling poorly or something. Anyways, and another little interesting thing that I want to bring up real quick, and I have that somewhere in the thing here. In 1976, they did a scientific study trying to prove what could have caused stuff like that happened back then that gave them these fits. And they discovered that there was something in the wheat and barley and stuff that was in the cereal.
Correct.
That
it was a fungus.
Would cause the symptoms that they were showing.
Correct.
So all these people got put to death because something in a cereal.
Well,
it blows my mind. You know,
yes,
I mean, if it's proven to be a fact, that blows my mind that these people died because of, and of course we know that some of them were accused. They used the chance to accuse these people because they wanted to take their land, or they didn't like something about them.
That's what it all come down to. It all come down to after the three girls, everyone started. All the accusers were just naming people off because they didn't like how they dressed or they wanted something out of them. And it's
Exactly, and that was
ridiculous.
one of the girls that they executed the first one, in fact,
Hmm.
because she was hung out at the local bars, so to speak, and because she dressed flamboyantly, which was not the Puritan style of the time.
Right.
So, what better way of getting rid of what we would term as a harlot, for a little bit more softer word than I would have used,
Hmm.
uh, than to accuse them of being a witch? Well, we'll just get rid of them that way. Oh, and they got
Sure.
some nice choice land with some apple orchards, and we'll just take those too, you know?
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, all three women were considered social outcasts anyway for different reasons. You know what I mean? And the first one, I mean, Sarah Good, basically, uh, she was charged at the age of 38. I mean, she looked like she was 70 years old. You know what I mean? She was basically pregnant. She had a 4.5-year-old daughter named Dorcas Good. And the verdict that was decided for her trial that she was a witch, and many people testified against Sarah Good, including her husband, all because she showed um, I guess her daughter said to her mother that she was given a snake, and she showed the judge a red spot where she said the snake bit her and sucked out her blood, and that was a big part of why Sarah Good was found guilty. Unfortunately for Dorcas, which was her daughter, the snake bite, she also got accused of being a witch herself. You know what I mean? And the fact that her mother was an accused witch put even a bigger target on this young girl. And sadly, no one cared that Sarah Good died. Everyone seemed to think that justice was served and that Sarah Good was a witch, even though she didn't believe in witches. Uh, Everyone was glad to get rid of her. So
Okay,
Sarah Good was executed on July 19th of 1692.
let me hold
Uh,
you up right there for a second. We're
sure.
live on WCJV Digital Broadcasting out of Youngstown, New York. The CJ Mars Radio Network. You're listening to Half Past Dead Paranormal Radio with your host, Roger Belt, and my guest, Christina Corsetti. And I felt the buzz from the shot collar there. I figured I better get that out there, Dita. Uh, and another one of the questions that I had concerning that was, why were Sarah Good and Sarah Osborne charged when Tituba had given the girls something or shown them rituals and stuff like that, that would prove her guilty of being a witch or whatever, or what they would call being a witch? What did
Sure.
Sarah Good and Sarah Osborne do?
Well, they didn't do much of anything basically. Sarah Osborne herself had not attended church in almost 3 years due to a long illness. And still wanted to deal with legal issues with the Putnam family. The accusations against Sarah Osborne likely were the product of powerful suggestion from the Putnam family. So the accusers actually, which are Ann Putnam Jr., Sr., and Ann Putnam husband, basically, Elizabeth Hubbard was also accused of Sarah Osborne for afflicting her, basically describing her pinching and poking her with knitting needles. Well, Osborne denied all her accusations against her. Sarah Good basically twisted the company of the girls' accusations towards her, and later Tituba would claim that all three of them were indeed working with the devil. So you have Tituba saying, well, all three of us, we are witches and we are working with the devil, and she's the only one that confessed to it, while, Sarah Good and Osborne basically are innocent, saying, we're not witches, you know what I mean? But, basically, Sarah Osborne was also questioned about her dreams and whether or not she had ever dreamt of Indians, which is a believed sign of witchcraft and the devil. Well, she did admit that she had a recurring dream about an Indian who would take her by the hair and drag her out to her house. So with that of her dreams and Tituba's confession that she was guilty, basically she was arrested, placed in Boston jail. She never actually got executed, Sarah Osborne, But she died in jail on May 10th, 1692, and was believed about 49 years old.
Okay, right in here real quick. I want to bring up, and I believe when I was reading about the Malleus Maleficarum,
yep.
Also, I was reading about some of the tortures that they did to convict a witch. Now, one of the things that they did was they would strap them to a chair attached to a pole, and they would dip them in the water.
Oh, yes.
Now, they believed that anything pure would float and anything evil would sink.
Yep.
Well, naturally, if you take a pole with somebody strapped to a chair tied to a pole and you raise that pole up, they're going to sink.
Yeah, well, it's like they're set up to fail.
It's an automatic way of condemning somebody, basically.
Yeah, it's just, I mean, going back to the medieval torches, it's just unbelievable back then, you know. It's pretty interesting.
So if they wanted something they had, basically all they had to do was, let's give them the water test, you know.
Yeah.
Because they knew that they were going to be convicted.
Yeah.
Now, there's a lot of stuff I read, and I can't remember word for word off the top of my head right now. Let's get back into this, where we were talking about, Sarah Good died in prison, basically. She never got to be executed.
Yeah, she never got executed. But as far as Tituba goes, I mean, it is kind of wild, however, that Tituba's confession, you know, wound up escaping with her life, and nothing is ever known about her after the witch trials of 1692. And basically, those who remained with their innocence were actually hung in the gallows. You know what I mean? It's like the ones that were really innocent, you know what I mean, through the whole thing, they were just hung. And then here you are having, you know, Tituba in jail, never get executed. You know, some mysterious guy came down and bailed her way out of jail, and then took her and then escaped. So nothing is known about Tituba after that. And she's the only one that confessed, and she never got hung. I just find it interesting.
Well, it says that she said,
it's like it didn't matter what the verdict
the devil came to me and bid me serve him.
Correct.
And she found herself in jail with Paris not willing to pay her jail fees. Pay her jail fees?
Correct, because Tituba belonged to Samuel Paris. That's who Tituba belonged to. And because she wound up in jail, but never being executed or hung, you know, Paris wouldn't pay her jail fees to get her out of jail. So some mysterious guy came along, and no one knows who it is, and they paid her.
Oh, in other words, he wouldn't pay her bond.
Yeah, correct.
Okay.
To get her out of jail. He said, leave her there. He wouldn't pay her fees.
Person did. Wonder who that was.
And they don't know who that person is. And they escaped with Tituba, and nothing is ever known about her. And she's the only one that confessed to saying that, yes, we are witches. I just find it very interesting, the fact that everyone got hung, and the only one that confessed with her life
wound up getting away.
Correct. I find it very interesting.
That is really weird.
Yeah.
Okay, Tituba after 1692, those who remained with their innocence were hung at the gallows, even when people's verdicts came back not guilty.
Correct. It didn't matter if the verdict came back guilty or not. It's like you were getting hung. You were being tried. Because that's what they said at the witch trials. They actually came back with a few non-guilties, and the judge says to them, I think you want to reconsider.
Right.
And then they came back with a guilty verdict. So it was like, it didn't matter if you were found guilty or innocent, you were getting hung regardless as a witch. Correct.
Okay, and this is where I told you I read this about the effort to explain by scientific means strange afflictions suffered by those. Toxicologists said it can cause symptoms such as delusions, vomiting, muscle spasms, and so on, which is what they were basically showing.
Yes.
Okay. Bridget Bishop.
Okay.
In 1692, the Special Court of Oyer and Terminer to hear and decide. This was a court focused to hear and decide convened in Salem under Chief Justice William Stoughton to judge the accused. The first to be tried was Bridget Bishop of Salem, who was accused of witchcraft by more individuals than any other defendant. Bishop, known around town for her dubious moral character, frequented taverns, dressed flamboyantly by Puritan standards, and was married 3 times. She professed her innocence but was found guilty and executed by hanging on June 10th, 1962. Now, she was the first one hung, right?
Correct.
Even though these other ones were accused before her.
Yes.
You know,
it didn't. Yeah.
Just because she was different.
Correct. It didn't matter. I mean, she was the first one hung, but Bishop had been accused by more individuals of witchcraft than any other defendant.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. Because of her attitude, because of her dress, because of her lifestyle.
Correct.
In other words, you don't dare to be different in Salem, Massachusetts. You'll get hung as a witch. You know.
Yeah. Yeah, she was also one of the gossipers. Okay, so gossiping a lot, drinking, playing forbidden games of shuffleboard, being a mistress of 2 thriving taverns in town. Like you said, the way she dressed, her character, everything about her basically is one of the reasons why she was one of the first ones basically to be hung. It contributed a lot to it.
And now you were saying here that, of course, we knew about her lifestyle being flamboyant and all that. Publicly fighting with her various husbands, entertaining guests in her home until late at night, drinking and playing in the forbidden game of shovelboard.
Yep. Okay. And she was a mistress of 2 taverns in town.
What exactly is shovelboard? I was thinking shuffleboard, but
shovelboard. Okay,
explain shovelboard to me. Okay.
It's just an old fashioned, game that I guess they used to play, and I don't know. It could be the same way we play shuffleboard. I'm not really too sure exactly what shovelboard is, but I guess it was forbidden back then and you weren't allowed to play it, and she would play it.
Obviously, she got hung for it, so among other things.
Yep, basically the way she dressed, her act, her attitude, basically it was all part of her conviction and execution.
And they were afraid that the way she acted and dressed and carried on would bring their younger people into corruption.
Yeah, they didn't like it. And so because of it, she was a witch and she got tried and she found guilty, even though she pled out her innocence. It doesn't make a difference. Once you got accused for being a witch, that was it. It's either you run and escape or you're going to sit there and you're going to die. But not all of them died. There was a lot that, died in jail. There was a lot that were in jail. There was a lot that, came out of jail after the said witch trials ended. Okay.
It says 13 more women and 5 men from all stations of life followed her to the gallows. One man, Giles Corey, and everybody, if you read anything about the witch trials, you know what happened to Giles Corey, was executed by crushing.
Correct.
Most of those tried were condemned on the basis of the witness behavior during the actual proceedings, characterized by fits and hallucinations that were argued to have been caused by the defendants on trial. Now, my question here was, do you think that these people who were accusing others of witchcraft practiced their actions that they would act out in court, just like an actor would learn their lines for a movie script?
Mm-hmm. Basically, I do believe they acted out in court to convict someone, because people who scoffed at, accusations of witchcraft risk becoming targets of accusations themselves, basically. Ann Putnam Jr., she was one of the most vocal accusers during the trial. And many people, thought that, Ann Putnam accused those that were in her family or Reverend Parris had squalled with. So Some historians have speculated that her parents coerced her to accuse those that were feuding or sought out to revenge on. See what I mean?
Right.
Susanna Sheldon filed 24 legal complaints against her alleged tormentors. Basically, throughout the trial, she alleged experienced apparitions from specters, and she tried to persuade her to sign the Devil's Book, Visions of the Dead, visual manifestations, snakes, birds, anything like that. Symptoms of feeling physically choked and having their hands bound so tight that she could not free herself. I mean, she was making up stories, you know what I mean?
Right. But see, you're talking about what she was saying that they did.
Correct.
I'm talking about when these people came in the courtroom and acted out their like fits and they were around this person who supposedly bewitched them, so all of a sudden they go into fits and start vomiting, or not vomiting necessarily, but spasming and carrying.
I know what you're saying. They would do that in court to prove to them, because basically because those who got accused of witchcraft were accusing those that were accusing of witchcraft. If they didn't accuse somebody else and get them off them, they would be accused of witchcraft. So they were acting out in court to show that these people are bewitching me. So that way it gets the court not looking at the accusers as, oh, they're witches themselves. See what I mean? So yeah, they were acting out. Absolutely.
Yeah, like the two girls that accused Tituba and all them, they were acting out the spasms and the whole contortion thing, and that way they were sure to convict these people because they were causing them to have fits right now in the courtroom.
Correct.
I mean, how bad could you want somebody to be hung? What could somebody possibly do to you that was bad enough to make you mad enough to want to see them tortured and hung? Really? I mean, I don't get it.
Yeah. It's just the way it was back then. Everything was fine until these girls started, saying and talking about, and it made the whole hysteria of the witchcraft trials. And then look what happened at the end when they apologized for the witchcraft trials.
Exactly. Well, it's kind of late to apologize after the people are dead.
I mean, Nathaniel Hawthorne was so ashamed of what happened that he added a W to his name so he wouldn't be associated with.
Yeah, I read that too.
Yes.
But now Nathaniel did not actually participate in it. He just didn't want to be associated with the name.
No, correct. He was just ashamed.
Which is interesting because we're going to get into a little bit about Nathaniel here in the haunted locations part later. But Mary Walcott was the most notorious of the accusers. Her role in the Salem witch trials was by no means minimal. She was said to have been claimed in the beginning, but later critics accused her of being a witch herself.
Yeah, see what I mean?
Yeah, now so you can do this and have it turn on you.
Correct.
Beware of what you do.
You have to distract them not looking at you, so you have to accuse others so they don't look at you as you being accused of doing something, because you're just as innocent as they are, and you're lying about it.
Exactly.
Because I forget which one, but I want to say it was Ann Putnam Jr. admitted to lying after the witch trials. So it just goes to show you, it's like, I'm going to point the finger at you before they point the finger at me. And that's what it was all about back then.
Abigail Williams and Betty Paris began to undertake experiments in
fortune telling. Yep.
Fortune telling.
Yep.
Focusing their future social status and potential husbands. They were quick to share their game with other young girls, even though the practice of fortune telling was regarded as a demonic activity. So they could distract the attention away from them. They started blaming people for bewitching them, and then the hysteria began. So basically, they were doing this stuff, and then they were afraid they were going to be accused, so they started accusing people and blaming them for what they were doing.
Yes.
Would I be correct there?
You are definitely correct. Yes, you are.
That's, man, think about, would you want to live in a time like that when, let's just say you wanted to go rob somebody and you knew you was going to be accused of it, so you turn around and you say, well, I didn't do it. It was so-and-so over there, or, it was John over yonder. He was the one that done it. I saw him, and that easily, this person can be convicted and hung while you're guilty.
Correct. And I always wanted to live back then. I always said I'm in the wrong generation.
Ooh, I wouldn't want
I always wanted to live back in the
Don't think I would have wanted to been there.
I don't know why. I just have a fascination towards it.
I used to have this thing about wishing I could have lived during the Civil War era, but then again, I don't know if I want to live there either.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
But it's just to think of how easy it was to get a person convicted and hung, or
Very
tortured
easy.
and hung for something you did.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it'd be very easy. And they believe almost anything because, I mean, going back to, these people eating rye with fungus in it, and it gives them, these symptoms that they're claiming is part of the devil's work. And, you can only imagine,
Okay, was talking about Abigail and Betty Parris and what they did. Corey placed a curse on Salem and its sheriff during his torture. And Corey, of course, y'all know I'm talking about the one they declared was a warlock, and they couldn't get him to confess. He wouldn't go along with the trial, so they basically put a board on his chest and piled heavy stones on him and crushed him to death.
Correct.
He placed a curse on Salem and its sheriff during his torture by shouting, "Damn you, I curse you and Salem," at the sheriff's before he died.
Yes. Yeah, about the curse of Giles Corey.
Yeah.
Well, basically, he did, when he was his last breath, he did say, "Damn you, I curse you," in Salem, basically. What happened is about 40 years after Giles Corey's death, Sheriff Corwin died suddenly of a heart attack. He was about 30 years old. Okay, and local legends suggest that Corey not only cursed Corwin, but every sheriff in Salem, because since then, in the 1970s, Salem Sheriff Robert E. Cahill was forced to retire, basically due to a stroke, a heart attack, and a rare blood condition. So doctors couldn't find the cause, basically, of his afflictions, and he was forced to retire, and basically he was the keeper of the jail. Well, he believed that the sheriff's office was moved from Salem to basically where the new prison now is in Middleton since 1991, and they claim that broke the curse and spared all the future sheriffs, because since the move, no sheriffs had been diagnosed with any heart conditions, blood ailments, or had passed away from it. But I guess up until that time, they were just dropping dead.
Yeah, I mean, how, you got to think about how many sheriffs, future sheriffs actually died from mysterious causes, like during their term, as sheriff or whatever, after that happened.
Well, it was quite a few and that's why they believe the curse broke when they moved
And then they moved it to another county.
They moved it to another county, yeah,
and then it quit.
And quit. But also,
so that would prove then that the curse on Salem was on Salem, not just the sheriff, because when they moved to a different county and it stopped,
yeah,
then that basically says, well, yeah, it's because it was in Salem. If they located it elsewhere, it wouldn't happen.
Well, I guess whenever tragedy struck in Salem, people claimed to see Giles Corey soon after that event, so they believed, that he cursed Salem. because every time there was the fire in 1914, they believe that Corey still haunts the area around Howard Street Cemetery, where the old jail was. Basically, when the fire of 1914 happened, witnesses saw a ghostly figure of an old man floating through the cemetery. The fire actually started near Gallows Hill, where Giles Corey's wife, Martha, and 18 other people were hanged, basically, where the gallows were. But before it spread, it destroyed much of the town. So 1914 wiped out a good majority of Salem, and after that was the last time they actually seen Giles Corey's ghost. They haven't seen it since. So maybe that could have been, burning the whole land could have something to do with breaking the curse itself too.
Okay. The end of the witch trials in October 1692, Governor William Phipps of Massachusetts ordered the Court of Oyer and Terminer dissolved and replaced with the Superior Court of Judicature, which forbade the type of sensational testimony allowed in the earlier trials. Executions ceased, and the Superior Court eventually released all those awaiting trial and pardoned those sentenced to death. The Salem witch trials, which resulted in the execution of 19 innocent women and men, had effectively ended. And my last question on this part of the show, do you think that the killings really stopped just because the trials did? Or do you think that some of the people who feel like the condemned to death should still die possibly could have killed some of these people, not in the public eye, so to speak, but,
No, I believe they stopped killing them. Many people in the town of Salem started feeling the trials were getting way out of hand anyway, and they were killing many innocent lives. So when Governor Phipps issued that protective, the current prisoners from harm and suspended any more arrests of people accused of witchcraft, the aftermath of the Salem witch trials were severe. So people were stuck in jail, unable to pay their dues. They couldn't get out of jail. Other people were convicted, had their land confiscated, leaving families broke and homeless. Many people after the witch trials could not get along with each other, basically like the accusers and the families that were being accused. So many people tried to repent their accusations and make public apologies to the families of the accused to Salem. Many people did forgive, but many families still didn't think it was enough. Most of the afflicted women have been lost to history. The young ones married, changed their names, moved away. Lots of families moved away from Salem Village. So after the trials took a toll on the surrounding land, basically, houses and fields were left unattended. The planting season basically was interrupted. You had crop failure, which was crazy because that was all their food. The Puritans felt that these events were happening because God was punishing them for the hangings of the innocent people. So basically, in April of 1692, the proctor, servant, and accuser, Mary Warren, that's the one, she admitted lying.
Yeah.
She admitted lying and accusing the others of accusing girls they were lying too. So no one now could believe anything, basically, between the accused and the accusers, because the accusers just claimed they were lying, and they don't believe the people still wanted to kill after that. So I believe it stopped at that point, and people just basically gathered up, moved away. They lost their homes, they lost their crops, and they just moved away, married, changed names.
Yeah, but wouldn't you think that those that admitted that they lied and caused the deaths of innocent people should have been convicted of treason and hung themselves?
Yeah, I believe so.
I would have thought so. Hey, look what you did.
Yeah,
Look at the people that died because of you getting up here and lying to people. And of course, it wasn't like nowadays where, you're under oath and if you lie in court, you're convicted of treason. It wasn't like that.
Yeah.
It should have been like that, but it wasn't like that.
But I think after the witch trials and hanging all those innocent people, I don't think they wanted to do any more damage, even though they probably deserved it for lying. Because all that lying, look what it caused. It caused, 20 people to
of their innocence to basically, die for nothing.
Well, and then it could have been the same way, such and such people, accuse somebody else of lying when maybe they wasn't. And
But it was the doctor himself. It was the doctor himself
yeah,
basically said that we can't find anything wrong with these children, and that's when he said it was witchcraft, and then the girls went along with that and said it was witchcraft, and then they blamed the 3 people.
and then they blame more people who blame more people who blame more people.
Exactly, and then it just goes out of hand.
And if they wanted, like I said before, if they wanted their property or whatever, they would lie and accuse them of being witches or whatever. Get them condemned and then take over their property and stuff like that. So it became more from people showing like signs of stuff that you would consider maybe being bewitched, like the convulsions and the vomiting and the this and that, to just people who had greedy motives taking advantage of the situation and saying, yeah, so-and-so's a witch,
Correct.
Man, that's just weird. Okay, we're at our hard break time. We're live on WCJV Digital Broadcasting out of Youngstown, New York, the CJ Mars Radio Network. This is Half Past Dead Paranormal Radio with your host, Roger Belt, and my very interesting guest tonight, Miss Christina Corsetti. We're going to take about a 5-minute break and go fill your coffee cups, potty break, whatever you need to do, and prepare yourself for the second hour, which we're going to talk about haunted locations in Salem, Massachusetts. So,
yes,
don't nobody go away. Get your coffee, get your wine, your beer, whatever it is you're drinking and consuming, and come back and we'll carry on. And we are back live on WCJV Digital Broadcasting out of Youngstown, New York. The second hour here, we're going to talk about Salem's haunted locations.
Yes.
And these are very interesting, too. The witch trials and all is interesting, and these places are interesting, and some of them may even have to do with or be in close relation to stuff that happened during the witch trials, okay? So the first place we're going to talk about is the City Hall. Officials do not admit to the haunting of a suicide victim in Salem City Hall on the Washington Street, but they cannot disprove it. Rumors indicate experiences of ghostly footsteps, thumping sounds, and sense of pain, thick air, and a sensation of rapid spinning where the suicide took place. My question is, do they allow investigations, and does it cost?
Well, not that I'm aware of, basically. The building's still in use, and not only that, they won't admit to any of the hauntings in the building. So because of that, I don't think you can get investigations there.
That's sad. I mean, I'd love to be able to check that out, and because sometimes I can sense when things are around. And if I stood in that spot where the spinning was, I would just like to see if it would affect me.
Correct. A lot of people do. But a lot of people have the workers there, like you said, they experience footsteps and thumping sounds. They feel things, a sense of pain, thickness, sensation of rapid spinning. So, but yeah, as far as I'm aware of, they don't do any investigations there.
Well, we can't have everything, I guess.
I know.
Okay. Now, the Custom House, and remember I said we were going to bring up Nathaniel Hawthorne?
Correct.
Here we go.
Here we go.
Was constructed in 1818 and is located on Derby Wharf, which is another interesting place because a lot of other stuff goes on around there. 1847 through 1849, Nathaniel Hawthorne was employed here as a custom surveyor.
Correct.
Who was terminated from employment due to constant claims of seeing ghosts walking through the halls of the Custom House. Most of his time on the clock was spent writing his novel. Now, remember this right here because I'm going to bring up something about that. The Scarlet Letter is about Hester Prynne, who conceives a daughter through an affair and struggles to create a new life of repentance and dignity. This lady is found guilty of adultery and is required to wear a scarlet A on her dress to shame her, and she must stand on the scaffold for 3 hours to be exposed to the public humiliation. Employee experiences are hearing ghosts of ship captains, and we'll bring up something about this too, discussing treasured items and desired trades aboard their ships. They hear footsteps and experience flickering lights. The custom house is now a museum that is open for guided tours. All of the furnishings are original, which is pretty rare to find, I agree. The custom house was built in 1819 and was run by the United States government. Well, who'd have thought? The inspectors who were employed there were responsible for weighing and inspecting cargo, as well as filling out all of the documentation that goes along with these duties. Now, question, did he get fired because he claimed to see ghosts, or lack of doing his job because he was busy writing his book?
Well, even though Hawthorne did report seeing ghosts throughout the halls of the Salem Custom House, he was basically fired from his job when it was discovered that he spent all his time working on his novel. That was basically why, he did see both, but he got fired due to writing his novel. I actually did a lot of research on Nathaniel Hawthorne, and he worked both at the Boston and Salem Custom House. So in 1839, he was a position in the Boston Custom House, weighing and engaging salt and coal. That's when he met Sophia Peabody. That was who he wanted to marry at that time, and he ended up quitting his job at the Boston Custom House, basically because he wanted to purchase a new community in Roxbury, Massachusetts, called the Brook Farm. Well, basically, after he was working at the Brook Farm, he became very unhappy. He wanted his money back. He wanted to take that money and start a new life with her. So they ended up getting married, and that's when he moved back to Salem and started working at the Salem Custom House.
Okay, and this was in 1842.
Correct. Is when he married Sophia.
And they moved to Boston.
Correct. He moved to Salem into actually
in 1845.
Correct. So the Custom House is very well known because it was mentioned the beginning of the Scarlet Letter, basically. But he worked as a surveyor in 1847 to 1849, and basically was fired more towards the fact that he was writing his novel on the clock. So.
Now, that goes to show you that there's two things you can't do while you're on the clock: sleep and write novels.
Correct. Which he did a lot. He had a lot of books, absolutely.
Okay. Now, my next question involving that was the rumors of sea captains' voices being heard talking about their treasures and whatnot. Were these ghosts of these sea captains honorable or pirates?
Well, you got to understand, a common type of sailor back in these days were stated basically as pirates, called privateers. They're smugglers, and basically, rumors hold that a series of smuggler tunnels were built in the wharfs area, located local basements to avoid custom duties, among their less savory reasons. The Custom House and the Derby Wharf were allegedly teeming with spirits of Salem's marine time, past ranging from ghostly pirates mysteriously emerging from water and walking around the sea captains whispering in the Custom House about their treasures and what they smuggled overseas. Visitors were very sensitive to the paranormal, often reporting seeing full-body apparitions, also sea affairs, walking around Derby Wharf. People claim to have heard footsteps, but no one was there. They would have cold spots on warm summer days. So the paranormal activity was a norm near the lighthouse at the end of the wharf. One woman felt icy cold hands on her shoulders and spotted an 1800s fisherman, basically, who immediately disappeared when she turned around.
Where am I at when these things go on?
Yeah, so I mean, the Derby Wharf and the Custom House were very, very... a lot of things were being seen around there, and a lot of it was the pirates. And
I'd love to visit that place. That'd be awesome.
It's beautiful. It's such a beautiful area.
Okay, and you say also the interesting story of the old Andrew Johnson and Salem
Oh, yeah.
Bay schooner. So tell us about that.
Yes, the Andrew Johnson is a Salem-based schooner with a crew of 26 men, and it was running before a storm that was that caught up in a hurricane in about Georgia Banks area. And in this storm, the ship Charles Haskell, which was reported to be a bad luck ship, collided with the Johnson and sliced her in half. So the crew of the Haskell could not do much more than just watch the crew of the Johnson struggle and finally succumb to the wild seas. But the Haskell was able to limp back to port and repair itself. Well, there was a trip one day on the Georgia Banks that went crazy. 6 days into the trip, the midnight watch awoke the captain. The night watchman on the Haskell saw appeared to be dark, shadowy figures rise from the sea. There were about 26 of them, and it was clear that these shapes were men. It was like shadowy men figures. They climbed on board to the Haskell, and it was observed that their eyes were dark, like hollowed out holes, and they were of oilskin for their clothes. The shadow sailors took up position about the ship, and when through the motions of cod fishing, they fished the night away, only to disappear in the dawn. So the captains were so terrified, and the crew, they took control of the ship that morning and set sail for home. However, the next night did the same thing. The same specters, these shadowy men, appeared climbing back onto the ship, fishing the night away, and when dawn approached, they disappeared and they walked off into the direction of Salem. So that was an interesting story about the Andrew Johnson and the Charles Haskell.
That is just creepy.
Yeah.
Real quick here before we continue, Haunted Salem's official page on Facebook. If you want to read some very interesting stuff, and not just about Salem necessarily, but all kind of places and different stuff like that, go check out that page. You will love it. I promise you.
Thank you. Yeah, it's all about the paranormal. It's all about haunted locations and stories, and you have the occult, strange and bizarre, UFOs even, anything that has to do with the paranormal.
Weird facts and stuff about all different kind of things. That's why I like it so much.
Thank you.
Okay, Derby Wharf,
Sure.
where the Friendship is located. Now, where did that come from?
The Revolutionary War. Basically, it was used as a base back then.
Well, I mean, what does that have to do with where the Friendship is located? That's what I'm trying to.
Oh, Derby Wharf. Well, that's where we're talking about. Custom House is directly across the way from Derby Wharf, where the Friendship is located, and the Friendship is one of the old Salem ships.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Friendship's ship.
Was used in the Revolutionary War as a base. Salem, Massachusetts as a seaport. In about 1762, the colony's first millionaire merchant named Elias Haskett Derby started construction on the wharf that today bears his name. Many experiences. There are people seeing pirates climbing out of the water, walking around on the wharf as if they're looking for something. They hear sounds of footsteps coming up behind them. People feel cold air in 80-degree temperatures. Some have seen pirates walking around. One woman was touched by the fingers of the 1800s fisherman we talked about earlier who disappeared. Right. Were there any Revolutionary War ghosts seen?
Well, that's a tough question because you gotta think here. On February 26, 1775, Patriots raised the drawbridge at the North River, preventing British colonial Alexander Leslie and his 300 troops of the 64th Regiment of Foot from coming in and seizing stores and ammunition hid in North Salem. That's where you get the Leslie's retreat from, in Salem on North Street. Well, during the Revolution, the town became a center for privateering, and 800 vessels were commissioned as privateers, and they were credited with capturing and destroying about 600 British ships. So, not to my knowledge have I heard any reports of Revolutionary War ghosts seen near the Derby Wharf or in Salem, but Salem's maritime history is one of the busiest ports in the country. So from around the Revolutionary War until the 19th century, if you were to see, if you were to capture a Revolutionary ghost, it would be at the Derby Wharf. Plus, who's to say the ghosts already reported there aren't already from the war itself? So.
True. Okay, have you experienced any of this yourself?
Me, I have not. I'm sure, I have not yet experienced anything paranormal down in that area, but, if I took my paranormal investigation team down there and did an investigation, I'm sure I'd be able to come up with some evidence of the paranormal. I mean, you could do that anywhere in Salem. I could walk down to anywhere in Salem, take out my DVD recorder, maybe a digital camera or even a video camera, and I'd be sure to collect evidence from the investigation. So
okay, not necessarily a revolutionary spirit, but
correct. It could be anybody because they're everywhere.
Yeah,
it wouldn't necessarily just have to be from back in the day.
Well, when you think about all the stuff like the Salem witch trials, the Revolutionary War,
it's all different eras.
The pirates and the privateers and all that, and what all they do. There's bound to be some kind of activity there. There's got to be.
Really, there's got to be something.
You would think you could be able to go just about anywhere around there and find something.
Correct.
Okay, now Gallows Hill, where the Salem witch trial victims were executed and buried, remains a mystery to this day, and that's interesting. There are a number of reasons why the current Gallows Hill may not be the original site of the executions. The first reason being the hill is much too steep for the cart carrying the accused witches to climb. The second reason is that according to one local legend, Benjamin Nurse, son of accused witch Rebecca Nurse, supposedly rowed a boat under the cover of night from a creek near the Nurse homestead into the North River and right up to the base of the hill where the execution took place in order to gather his mother's body and give her a proper Christian burial on her property. Since there are currently no waterways and never have been leading directly to Gallows Hill or anywhere near it, this makes it an unlikely location for the execution site. The only clues that remain about the real execution site are a few letters and diaries discovered by historians over the years. Many believe the real Gallows Hill is located on the Walgreens locations on Boston Street.
Correct. There's a Walgreens right there on Boston Street, and they believe that the real Gallows Hill would be there, which would place the actual hanging tree somewhere on the North River.
Now, is there a riverway there or waterway there?
Yes, there is.
Okay.
Yes, there is.
Okay, makes sense.
That's why it's more believable, because it's not such a steep hill, and because back then they used a cart to transfer the accused up to the gallows.
Okay. It says Boston Streets, which would place the hanging tree somewhere along the North River. Right. A more recent school of thought has the site at Proctor's Ridge, a smaller hill. At the foot of Gallows Hill, Gallows Hill is rather steep, and it is recorded that the condemned were taken to the place of execution by cart, and certainly no cart could have made the final ascent to the top. And as several of the condemned were elderly and infirm, it's unlikely they could have walked up there. The original witch's hanging tree does not exist anymore. That's sad.
Yes.
And the deep crevice where they tossed the dead bodies of the poor wretches has closed in upon itself. Where the Gallows Hill is today, and this is one of the questions that I had. Where the Gallows Hill is today, experience have been seen in the park area are mist orbs, hearing cries, electronic equipment malfunctions. People have been touched, a woman's hair has been pulled, and hundreds of photos showing ghost energies and even angels.
Yeah.
So my question is, if this is not the original Gallows Hill, why do you think all this activity is going on there?
Well, that's a great question, and I would have to say because the land itself has history and ghosts are everywhere. Salem is very haunted, not just because the ghost of the Salem witch trials, but by other troubled spirits as well. So researchers may never document the exact location of the hangings or where most of the so-called witches are buried. However, additional research may reveal locations where unmarked graves and landmarks connect us to the Salem in 1692. But basically, the official Gallows Hill was designed basically by Reverend Charles Upham in 1867. And he admits, that there is no record of the hanging that took place there. It seemed that the community became so ashamed of the mass paranoia and mass murder that people suffered from collective amnesia. When Upham suggested that one hill in the area was the historic site, no one questioned him. That's why Gallows Hill is Gallows Hill today, because that's the land that he claimed was where it happened, and no one questioned him on it. But reports suggest that the hill's too steep, it's not closest to any body of water, and is a quarter of a mile away from making today's Gallows Hill not the exact location.
Now, see, that's interesting because, this person can just say, that's almost like back then when a person said you were a witch and you were guilty.
They're going to believe you.
He's saying that this is the spot, and because everybody's so ashamed, it's like, okay, whatever you say.
Exactly. And that's where Gallows Hill came today. So, you're not just getting, like I said, ghosts of the witch trials. You're also getting ghosts from the area.
If they basically, I don't know if they dug a ditch or if there was already a ditch there and they threw the bodies in there and it just kind of filled in on itself or whatever.
Yeah.
Couldn't you not locate a place like that was near where they thought that the site actually was, and where there was actually the waterway there where the person could have went to collect his mother's body or what have you, and find the indentation where the bodies were buried?
You would think that we would know where the bodies were buried. You'd think there'd be somewhere in record. Someone would have wrote it down. Someone would have said something. I don't know if it was a secret or not, but no one knows to this day where the real Gallows Hill is located. And we have maps of old Salem Village. And
it'd be really interesting to know the actual location to be able to investigate that area.
It would be awesome. It would absolutely be awesome, but it would cause a lot of public, a lot of people would go down there.
Well, it depends, I guess, if you were announcing it like really public that that's what you were doing.
I mean, think about it. The things they can do today, especially with forensic and science, you'd think that they'd be able to find out where the old Gallows Hill was.
Yeah.
That's just my thought.
I mean, we have a yellow fever cemetery here in Martin where Martin almost ceased to exist due to the yellow fever epidemic that broke out, which came up here by train from Memphis. And at the time, it would have been actually, I guess, considered outside of town.
Okay.
Because like you had basically the main strip that went, I guess, north to south.
Okay.
And this cemetery would have been like off to your southwest, out of where the town would have been. Now it's like almost right in town. But you never see anybody investigating that place simply for the fact that closed-minded people like Martin's Finest would frown on that.
Yeah.
And probably wouldn't allow you to do that. But in the back of this, there's also supposedly a mass grave where people were dying so fast from the fever they couldn't give them a proper Christian burial, so they were wrapping them in sheets and they were putting them in this mass pit, and all that. Stuff like that. And that's probably why nothing goes on there. Nobody's ever investigated or said, yeah, we got some stuff here, because of the public eye, like you were saying, would probably cause a stink, I can see why they wouldn't want you going there and digging up the past, I guess.
Yeah.
Sure. Although it would be a very interesting investigation, I got to say.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
But anyway, moving right along here, we have Gardner Pingree House.
Yes, the Gardner.
If I'm pronouncing that right.
Yes.
Located on 128 Essex Street in Salem. It was built for John Gardner Jr., a wealthy Salem merchant, and his wife Sarah in 1804. The home was designed by Samuel McIntyre, who was one of the earliest architects in the United States.
Right.
Gardner Pingree House is actually the Gardner West White Pingree House, as the house was sold in 1811 to Nathaniel West when John Gardner had some financial difficulties. 3 years later, West sold the house to Captain Joseph White, and this is where the ghost comes in.
Correct.
White, a wealthy retired merchant, Captain White, lived in the house with a manservant and his niece, Mrs. Beckford, who worked as housekeeper and who had a daughter that lived in Wyndham, Massachusetts, and was married to Joseph J. Knapp, Jr. The mansion is said to be haunted by Captain Joseph White, who was brutally murdered in the townhouse in 1830. What had happened was Joseph learned that the 82-year-old captain had made out a will, leaving $15,000 to Mrs. Beckford, and it was then that he got the idea that if his great uncle by marriage were to die without a will, that his mother-in-law would then inherit half of Captain White's sizable fortune instead of an amount that was nearly $200,000, and by default, some of that fortune would then go to him.
Correct. Yeah, he was too impatient for his uncle to die.
Captain White's nephew was too important for his uncle to die naturally, so he hired a hitman.
Correct.
By the name of Richard Crowninshield. On the night of April 6, 1830, Captain White was brutally murdered when Crowninshield entered the house through a window that had been left open by Joseph earlier in the day. Went to the bedroom where Captain White was sleeping and fractured the captain's skull with a club, as well as stabbing him 13 times with a long dagger. In 1834, the house was sold to David Pingree, and the ownership of the house remained in the Pingree family until 1933, when it was donated by the Pingree heirs to the Essex Institute, which later merged with the Peabody Museum to become the Peabody Essex Museum. Some say they believe this murder repeats itself every year on the anniversary of Captain White's death. Others say they have seen him looking out windows, some on camera. That'd be interesting. People claim to see ghostly faces looking out of the second floor windows, and many have claimed to hear ghostly footsteps while touring the house. They prosecuted the involved by such a high standard. They call the house the clubhouse due to the game Clue. Now, where does that come in?
It's just where the game Clue came from, because it was.
Really?
Yeah, it was.
I didn't know that.
They called it the Clue House because of all the.
Wow.
All the clues and the problems in the house that eventually evolved into that game Clue, and that's where a lot of it came from.
So, being Scarlet in the kitchen with a rope, that's where that all came from?
Mm-hmm.
Wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah, came from this house.
Very interesting.
And that murder. Yes.
Very, very interesting. Okay, I feel the zap of the shock collar around my neck. We're live on WCJV Digital Broadcasting out of Youngstown, New York. The CJ Mars Radio Network. This is Roger Belt, and you're listening to Half Past Dead Paranormal Radio with our guest, Christina Corsetti, and we're talking about the Gardner Pingree House, amongst other things. Now, I had a question for you. Is the captain's ghost the only reported spirit in the house, and has he ever caused harm to any of the living?
Well, actually, you can tour the Gardner Pingree House as well as go inside, and people have had many experiences on the tour. Because of its horrible act committed in the house, it does seem to hold a residual haunt. People do claim to sense of a woman as well, so I don't think he's the only one in the house. I would have to say more than the captain's ghost is reported here, so no, he also has never caused any harm to the living.
Okay. He, like I said, that's interesting about the clue thing. I didn't know that.
Yeah, yep.
Okay, so any of you people out there that play the game Clue, now you know where it came from.
Yep, the original came from the Gardner Pringy house in Salem.
Awesome. Okay, we are going to talk about the Hawthorne Hotel.
Yes.
Located at 18 Washington Street in Salem, the hotel was named after Salem's famous author Nathaniel Hawthorne, who wrote the novels The Scarlet Letter and The House of the Seven Gables, which we will also talk about a little bit about. The Hawthorne Hotel has had many famous guests and been utilized and seen in numerous television shows, including Bewitched, if any of y'all ever watched that show, and the Sci-Fi Channel show Ghost Hunters. Most of the buildings surrounding the hotel were constructed by the Salem Sea Captains. They were a lively group who assisted people in old age as well as people with disabilities. Now that's interesting. However, the Salem Marine Society was raised to give the hotel more space. Other paranormal activities in the hotel have been attributed to the sea captains who were returning to their gathering place. There have been many stories surrounding the hotel that seem to indicate that there could be spirits of ghosts lingering in the building. In a room of the hotel referred to as the lower deck, an employee of the hotel who was responsible for setting up the room and arranging the tables was quite startled after performing his duties, then leaving the room only to return and find this room rearranged. Room 612 is reportedly one of the most haunted locations in the hotel. The apparition of a woman has been seen to wander the halls outside the room, often pausing in front of the door. In the room itself, guests have often complained about an uneasy feeling as if someone was sharing the room with them. In room 325, there have been several reports of lights and faucets turning on and off of their own accord. There's also been reports of a baby crying in distress and feeling of being touched. Several hotel guests have reported hearing strange sounds and having strange occurrences. The hotel also has a large wheel and I thought this was interesting, a large wheel that turns, it's a ship's wheel.
Yes.
That's in the restaurant that turns around of its own accord, just turns by itself. As if controlled by the hands of long dead seafarer. It is also thought that the original land beneath the hotel was once an apple orchard that was owned by Bridget Bishop. Now there we go, tying it all together. Who was the first individual to be hanged at Gallows Hill? After being convicted of the practice of witchcraft, there have been many reports made that the strong smell of apples are experienced from time to time within the hotel. Now, my question here is, how many spirits do they claim are there, and how many, if any, have been caught on camera?
Sure. Well, Hawthorne Hotel seems to be very haunted. So throughout the history of the structure, there have been many stories that surround unexplained phenomenon and apparent paranormal activity. So while it has not yet been established that this particular hotel is in fact haunted, the individuals that have experienced the unusual events in the building do believe that there is more than meets the eye that's occurring here. There are several actual ghosts of haunted hotel, the Hawthorne Hotel, and it was featured on the Ghost Hunters TV show because the amount of reports that individuals were having there. But several guests have visited the hotel and experienced unusual phenomenon. And while TAP's team of ghost hunters were not able to pick up any evidence that there were ghosts in the Hawthorne Hotel, they did state that it's challenging to get ghosts to act on cue. So they were getting a lot of cue work done, probably with,
That's interesting that they say that, because that's one of the phrases that we use all the time, with our team. You can't spirits don't perform on cue. You're not guaranteed that you're going to get anything.
Correct. And it was challenging to them, but they didn't sit there and say that the place was haunted. Maybe they didn't get a lot of evidence. But supposedly a lot goes on at the hotel, especially in those two rooms, which are 612 and 325.
Okay, I would love to have a video of that ship's wheel turning in the restaurant. That'd be awesome.
That would be pretty cool. Yes.
Yeah. But now something like that could be rigged also. Just saying.
Yep. Skeptics view. Yep.
So it would be really hard if you did actually catch it on camera to say that, well, yeah, it's being turned by ghostly hands,
Yep.
Because I'm sure they're not going to let you go over there and tear it apart to see if it's rigged in any kind of way.
Exactly.
So, you kind of have to take that with a grain of salt, I guess. But anyway, and as I said, House of the Seven Gables. And I love this one because there was a movie made about it. Vincent Price played in it. Of course, the story of the House of the Seven Gables in the Vincent Price part, we know is probably not, what's the word I'm looking for here? Accurate. It's spiced up for the thrill of the movie.
Right.
But anyway, getting on with it. It's at 115 Derby Street in Salem. A local sea captain named John Turner built the house in 1668, and in 1782 was sold to Captain Samuel Ingersoll. Captain Ingersoll died at sea and left the house to his daughter, Susanna, which was Nathaniel Hawthorne's cousin, and left the house. Okay, this is where Nathaniel Hawthorne wrote the novel, The House of Seven Gables. Well, I wonder why. The structure did not originally have seven gables, as they were added over time, and several of them were actually removed at one point to make it appear like a standard house. Why would they want to do that?
Well, they wanted to make it look standard, so they didn't want to, put gables on it. But then, as the place started becoming getting reputation, they restored it to the original state and they added the seven gables.
Okay, I mean, it was just, I was like, why would they want to do that? However, it has been restored to its state with seven gables.
Yeah.
The spooky-looking house, along with its eerie inner passageways, has a reputation of being haunted. Some of the staff and guests claim to have seen Susan Ingersoll's ghost walking in the hallways or peering out the windows. Others have seen a ghost boy playing in the attic area. Now, who would that be?
The ghost boy? They don't even know.
I mean, where would he have came from? Anyway.
He has, he has the clothing on and everything, so he's from back then, but they don't exactly know who it is.
Okay, now, the ghost boy has supposedly been seen, right? Was he in, period dress or modern dress, or?
No, period dressing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, one of the noisiest ghosts said to haunt the House of Seven Gables.
Okay. Footsteps have been heard on the upper floors, him playing with his toys. Travelers visiting the home have seen faces in the window tapping on the glass and whispering in their ear as they walk along the guided tour. Now that would be creepy. Some of the guests feel uncomfortable up in the attic area. Of course, this probably has to do with the ghost boy. As though someone is watching them. They say they feel dizzy and off balance. Now, you've heard the explanation about steps, right?
The steps? Oh, the hidden passageways?
About the steps causing you to have a feeling of dizziness, off balance, because the steps are not level and straight. They may be cocked a little bit one way or the other. Right. Anyway, some witnesses have seen the rocking chair in the attic move of its own. Others believe they brought a spirit or two back home with them after taking the tour. Susanna Ingersoll seems to be the spirit that frequents the mansion the most. She has been seen peering out of the upper floor windows only to disappear. Some witnesses have seen her apparition roaming the various rooms and hallways, and again disappear as quickly as she appeared. Susan's spirit frequents the outside of the home as well, as she has been spotted in the gardens, which she loves so dearly. The noisiest ghost is said to be that of a young boy who can be heard running as he plays with toys in the attic. Another spirit haunting the home is said to be that of Nathaniel Hawthorne's son, Julian. He has been heard on the upper floors making noise in what sounds like the activity of him playing with toys on the floors. He has also been spotted peeking over the garden fences on occasion. In addition to the apparitions seen, many visitors and employees also hear strange sounds. The toilets sometimes flush of their own accord. Faucets turn on and off by themselves at times. The house was said to have been an end stop to the Underground Railroad, where slaves were freed in Salem. People have seen slaves running up and down the hidden staircases.
Sure.
What hidden staircases?
Well, that's what it is. When you go visit and do the tour on the House of Seven Gables, you see a lot of stuff, but you don't get to see all of it. And the things they don't show you are the hidden passageways and the hidden staircases.
So they're not going to let you go up and down the hidden staircases and stuff like that. Man, what a drag.
I know, it is.
I want to go, and that's the thing about those old houses like that always excited me was hidden passages and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, especially being, the Underground Railroad. You'd want to see that. They don't show it to you on the tour. No, they don't.
They take all the fun out of stuff.
They do.
Why have people got to do that?
I always wanted to have secret passageways and stuff.
Right. I said if I ever built a house, I was going to have one built.
Absolutely.
In that kind of style with hidden passages and stairways.
Mm-hmm.
And nobody ain't going to know about them but me.
Exactly. I love that.
Okay, so the question was, what's the deal with the ghost boy? And we already kind of answered that. Is there a story about him?
Well, no, there is not. Basically, people who live their homes while alive often want to stay in them. So not letting death get in the way. When their homes are restored, it's like a giant trigger, paranormal trigger, and it draws into the spirit world. And what happens is children who died from disease or accidents sometimes like to stay in their family home. It's like a safe place for them. So sometimes these spirits choose to stay in this world, appearing as children because it's a very happy time in their life, or because they're trying to work through a childhood trauma. So the entity of this little boy in the house, he likes to play around the attic. He looks out the windows. People that are sensitive and go there claim that it's a residual haunting that's associated with this young boy, and not a lot is known about him.
Okay, see, that's one of the things about it. If you ever read some of the haunted house ghost stories, et cetera, I remember reading about Summer Wind. I think was supposed to have a child locked up in the attic or whatever in a room. Why would this boy be prone to being in the attic? Was he kept there?
No, it's a residual haunting is like a movie that plays over and over again. He doesn't know he's dead. He's just living his last of his moments in his world.
So
it's like Groundhog Day.
It would be safe to say that he spent a lot of time when he was living playing in the attic.
And he was safe there, and that's where he went back.
Yeah. Okay. What about the slaves running up and down the hidden staircases?
Well, most of the ghostly behavior attributed to the slaves who passed through the house as part of the Underground Railroad. It's such a richly historic place where there's so much for tourists to see. They're not going to show you, like I said, these passageways and hidden staircases. But according to several reports, they witnessed a phantom of a man believed to be a slave trekking up and down these stairs. However, the hidden steps were built almost 50 years after slavery was abolished, so it's highly unlikely it's a residual haunt of a slave. But that's what they contributed to because it has to do with the Underground Railroad. So they believe that they are the slaves back then running up and down these staircases.
That's really interesting. I'd love to see the staircases and to see if you could feel any kind of presence in there, you know.
I'm trying to go into the underground tunnels itself and trying to get my own investigation down there as well.
I'd love to do that.
Yeah.
Okay, hold on for just a second.
Sure.
Okay, Howard Street Cemetery. Are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay. Located on Howard Street in Salem, the Howard Street Cemetery is located beside the old Salem jail, and that's another interesting thing. It is filled with many old gravestones, and the majority are in great shape. The cemetery land is directly correlated with Giles Corey, and y'all remember we talked about him. He's the one that was crushed to death.
Yes.
Okay. Corey, who was an elderly farmer accused of witchcraft, but refused to stand trial and make a plea as a result of this, he was stripped of his clothing, forced to lay on the field, have a board placed over his body, and heavy stones placed on him until he was crushed to death on Monday, September 19th, 1692. And, of course, he did the curse thing. We talked about this.
Yes.
The history of law enforcement and jail conditions in the 19th century were practically brutal, particularly brutal. And who knows what spirits it is that walks among the ancient tombstones. Giles Corey is the most famous ghost seen wandering the part of the cemetery, which is the corner of the cemetery that borders the parking lot of the old jail. Some hear moaning and in part in the park at night. Most of his ghosts was seen before the fire in 1914. Why would a fire cause his ghost not to be seen anymore? That's my question.
Yeah, well, that is a great question. Because as the curse goes, George Corwin, died of a heart attack, and then other sheriffs have suffered the same heart conditions as well. So over the years reporting seeing his ghost in their bedrooms. Some reported the sight stating that they felt a strong pressure on their chests as it didn't go away until Corey's ghost disappeared. There's also a legend that states when Giles Corey's ghost appears, he acts as a harbinger. It is said that his ghost is saw just before the 1914 fire, and then after that, it's just like he's never been seen again. So people believe that when they saw his ghost, that there was, torment to them for what happened to him. It was like tormenting Salem for what happened to him in the witch trials, and maybe he did this, or after people have passed away, there's no reason to come and be seen by others. Maybe something broke the curse. Maybe he no longer needed to come and be seen again. Maybe something happened and he was satisfied with everything that went on in Salem and he just didn't need to show his face anymore. So it's a good question why after 1914 has Giles Corey's ghost not been seen. No one really knows the answer to that.
Okay. Joshua Ward House. This is a long one, so everybody get a deep breath. Located at 148 Washington Street in Salem, while Joshua Ward himself made his wealth from Salem's port and sea business, it's the location of the house, not the man, who gives it its name, which inspires the home's notoriety. The Joshua Ward House has seen its own fame in books and the collective hauntings of Salem and comprehensive segment on the History Channel series Haunted History. The Joshua Ward House is built over the site of the original home of George Corwin. Now, I wonder why a place like that might be haunted. The High Sheriff of Essex County, 1692, constructed in 1780. They built the house over the foundation of George Corwin, who was the sheriff that got cursed during the Salem witch trial. And you would wonder why there would be any spirits there.
Right.
Okay.
Well, Well, he tortured them there.
He was
this
occupied.
Is where George Corwin brought everybody, is to the Joshua Ward house to interrogate them about the witch trials and being a witch.
George Corwin, who is best known for imprisoning over 150 people during the witch hysteria. George Corwin's uncle is Judge Jonathan Corwin, who tried and declared the residents as guilty witches. There's another good reason. After George Corwin died, his family feared the public would be angry at him because he declared their friends and family as witches, that they would desecrate his grave and body, so they buried him in the basement of his own mansion. Interesting.
Yes.
Years later, they exhumed and reburied him in the Corwin plot in the Broad Street Cemetery. Reports testify cold hands put on the backs of house employees, candles knocked over and twisted into S shapes, and that's one of the things I wanted to know about.
Why the candles were bent into S shapes?
Yes.
Your guess is as good as mine. Basically, they were found on the floor, tapered. They found melted into the shapes of letters. That I do not know why exactly. I just think it's the way that you can bend them. How else are you going to bend them?
Right, but why in a shape of an S? What does it signify? That's what I was wondering.
Yeah, that is a great question, and I don't think anybody knows the answer to that.
Okay, it says that mysteriously locked doors, overturned furniture, and cold spots, pretty standard fare for many ghostly activities, but perhaps the most compelling piece of supernatural evidence comes from a Polaroid taken of a new agent when the house served as a real estate office in the 1990s. The new associate posed for a headshot at the bottom of the stairs. A few minutes later, when the picture developed, a black-dressed figure of a woman was clearly visible standing at the top of the stairs. This is considered the witch of the Joshua Ward house. Many know this photo well because a lot of people claim it looks like Diana Ross because of the hair. Many people still believe Corwin haunts his own mansion along with the woman who had been seen wandering the halls. They claim the second floor is freezing cold. Often alarms go off that engage in calling the police and fire departments. A janitor quit his job right on the spot after bumping into a woman with long black hair who's thin and very pale. She has also been seen sitting in a chair upstairs staring out the window. There are two entities who reside here who were a woman with black, rather wild hairstyle. She is thought to be one of the victims unjustly accused. Her apparition has been reported roaming the hallways throughout the building, the other being the male entity of Giles Corey, a man falsely accused of being a warlock, who was tortured and killed by the crushing rocks method of interrogation. He isn't satisfied that his final curse has stayed with not only Sheriff George, but has affected many sheriffs who followed in the years after his horrendous death. Trash cans are found overturned, books are pulled from the shelves, rooms found in disarray, candles are taken out and melted. Cold spots are felt in certain corners of the certain rooms. An older male entity has been seen sitting in a rocking chair by the fireplace, in which people claim to be Corwin himself. Back in the mid-1980s, people have reported being choked by an unseen entity. This could be Sheriff George trying to reclaim his authority, or it could be one of his victims trying to show the living what they suffered. Items are moved around the mansion and candles are bent into the shape of an S. Okay, and I asked about the candles being bent in the S shape. Here's something I didn't know that you noted in here. Sheriff George Corwin was nicknamed the Strangler.
Yeah, Sheriff George Corwin was nicknamed the Strangler because of the way that he carried out the painful death sentences there. 19 men and women obviously were executed under his watch, either hung by the neck, suffering a slow strangulation, if they were lucky enough to survive the cruel interrogation process. And that's what he endured, basically. He turned out to be a sadist and came up with methods such as trying to accuse prisoners. Basically, he would, try and strangle them, shackles around their ankles until, blood came out of their nose. Anything that he could do to interrogate them, basically, to confess.
So it's safe to say that he enjoyed his job.
He enjoyed his job, and if you made it past that, in the Joshua Ward house, that interrogation process, then you were just hung as being a witch. But first, you had to get through his interrogation process. Yeah. That was pretty brutal, and that's why he was, nicknamed the Strangler, because he liked to do that to people. But as far as the spirits that remain in the house, like you said, the entity of a woman with black hair, like the Diana Ross, that's a very famous photo. She was thought to be one of the victims that was executed. The photograph of the witch, I posted a lot of time on my sites, but Giles Corey, he was said to haunt the house as well. And the entity of Sheriff George Cohen himself was said to haunt the house itself. But you're not actually allowed in the Joshua Ward house.
Yeah, I was right now.
Yeah, you're not allowed in there, and you're not allowed also, you can take pictures of the house, but you're not allowed anywhere near it. And it's being remodeled right now to be a bed and breakfast, so that's going to be pretty interesting when the time comes.
Who wouldn't want to rent a room there?
I would love.
Well, I know a few people that wouldn't, but so you can't even take a picture of the house?
You can take a picture of the house, but you can't get anywhere inside it. They're not going to let you inside.
Well, you said that you weren't allowed near it, so you'd have to take a picture from down the street or something?
No, you're allowed near it, out front of it. You're just not allowed on the property.
Ah, okay.
Like I can't walk past the gate.
Okay, we've got about a minute left. Well, actually, we don't have a minute left. This was awesome, and man, I still had several more to go through here. We ain't going to get to go through, but this has just been fabulous. I've enjoyed this.
I appreciate you for having me on.
You are a very, very interesting guest. Thank you so much for coming and joining us.
Thank you.
All my lovelies in the chat room there, thank you guys all for coming, which I see most of them are already gone. But anyway, thank you guys all for coming. Anybody on your iPhones, computers, etc., however you tuned in, we can't do a show without you. A big shout out to CJ Mars Radio Network. Couldn't do a show without y'all, of course. But mainly we can't do a show without a guest. So, Christina, you're in the limelight.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you having me on.
As of right now, my slate is clear, so I don't know who's going to be here next week, but I guarantee you it'll be interesting. Thanks, everybody, one more time. We are running a minute past, so we're going to get on out of here. You've been listening to CJ Mars Radio Network, Half Past Dead Paranormal Radio with Roger Belt and Christina Corsetti. Hope y'all enjoyed it as much as we did, and we'll see you next week.
You are listening to WCJV Digital Broadcasting, Youngstown, New York, the CJ Mars Radio Network.
Thank you for tuning in to Half Past Dead Paranormal with your host, Roger Belt. We hope you've enjoyed the show. And tune in again next week as we look for more answers to the unexplained, unknown, and unseen. Stay safe and happy hauntings. See you soon.